you again for listening to the Lip Talk Girls. We're here in this episode to talk about what previously was the Australian dream, to own your own home, pay your home off. However, now at 2020, there's a lot new, a vast array of living trends. So we're going to talk you through the benefits and how actually potentially to get into the market in a different way to maybe what you were brought up to believe or to what our parents had told us. So I'm going to talk through some different statistics, some different trends. Nicole, maybe you can help us on that side.
Yes, absolutely. And I think those trends have certainly changed from when we were growing up. So we're finding that there are more lone person households. So in 2016, you were looking at around 2.3 million were people that were living on their own. And we're anticipating in 2041 roughly for that number to be around 3.5 million.
Wow.
So that's quite a substantial number where more and more people are living on their own. So what we are finding is Australian women are having children later. And many years ago, actually not so long ago, the average was probably around 2.6 kids per family. Now it's around 1.7. So as Australian women, we are having less children. We are focusing more on our careers and we are having kids after the age of around 34. So how does that impact us? Well, we're leaving home much later. So as a result, we are not out saving for a deposit, buying a property at maybe our early 20s. We're doing that much later in life. What we see the trends will probably be is a lot more families or couples at least are focusing on smaller homes. So that big Australian backyard with a big swimming pool, certainly there's a space for that and we do sell those properties, but the trends moving forward are going to be smaller properties. We're also finding that families, because they are so busy and mostly both couples are working, they want more flexibility, they want a smaller property that they can maintain so that they can also lock up, travel. That's becoming quite important. So those days of not having overseas holidays have certainly changed, where now families want to lock up and go, and I'm sure you experience it as well.
It's quite lifestyle driven now, isn't it? Really, it's in the past our parents would stay at home. They wouldn't go out for dinner. They'd eat baked beans. They wouldn't have any furniture. You'd sit
Just
around
to pay
with
off their mortgage,
with a
for
camping
sure.
chair and sit, or a crate and sit on the ground. I remember my parents telling us that story. But would we do that now? We still, because we're busy as well though. It's not just because we want to go out to dinner every night, but we're so busy that we think that's the easy option out. So we are paying for meals out.
Correct.
So it's quite lifestyle driven that it's taking longer. Property prices are also more expensive as well.
Yes, so getting into the property market, it does take you a bit longer. I'm sure you see it as well with saving up for a deposit. It's not as easy as it used to be to get into the property market. So I think it's really important for parents to educate their kids. What is your plan? How much do you need to save to get into the property market?
On that side, it's very difficult for parents to educate though, because it is different from when they were actually purchasing themselves. So thankfully, like our government's offering quite good incentives at the moment, but there's also a way parents can help. So there's ways through them offering their home as guarantor security, which a lot of people don't know about as well. But I guess government incentives are a big one. So they offer concessions on stamp duties. They offer a deposit guarantee scheme at the moment, which has actually been just released recently.
How does that
Very
work?
popular. You still have to have so that you don't have to come with the lender's mortgage insurance. The government will actually secure a certain amount for you.
Right.
So lender's mortgage insurance has not come into the equation.
And that can be quite expensive, can't it?
Yeah, which means a smaller deposit, because even though they say at 5%, you actually still have to have other costs in there for your deposits. So, and that includes the lender's mortgage insurance. So the government, but there's only a certain amount of places. So they only do 10,000 in a year. A lot of them being snapped up very, very quickly.
And is that offered Australia-wide?
It is, and there's different criteria, different thresholds statewide, so from state to state. So
I've noticed more of the going back to trends where people are living more minimalist.
Yes.
So all of your programs on Netflix and
Like your Marie Kondo type.
Yes. We've all had to go at folding up our knickers in our drawers. I know I have, and my daughter who's 7.
What about your husband?
Not a chance.
But very
The
true.
day I can get that to happen will be the day that I run in the road naked.
Chris.
But going back to that minimalist living, you know,
Yes.
I know I grew up with my grandparents just having crockery in their house and, you know,
The little
cabinets
Oh, the
with
cabinets
trinkets
with all the
and,
Yes, that's
and
certainly
you go into
changed.
houses
The
and you
Avon-
can't
The
breathe.
little Avon collections that have, and the little
Yeah, the
teaspoon
Chanel
collections
The
that
teaspoons.
have.
Yes, a
Number
lot of that
5.
has changed. Yes.
So they lived in a very busy house that to them felt really homely, and obviously we can appreciate that when we were living back then, you know, being in that environment. But now, oh my God, I'd feel so claustrophobic
Yes.
living in a house like this.
Well, there is actually scientific research, and that is why a lot of people are changing to their minimalistic way. They're finding that our cluttered, busy lives,
Yeah.
social media, we've got access to so much. So coming back to your home, which is quieter, cleaner, less things lying all over the place, there are actual huge scientific benefits
Yeah.
to keeping your home neat, tidy,
Yeah.
minimalistic. So I think those will be the trends moving forward. And certainly, where are buyers purchasing their property? So, you know, you will find through different stages of your life there, when you're leaving home, will you be close to university? Will you be looking for a family home? Will you be a retiree? What are all your needs and wants
At that stage of your life.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, because
Yeah.
it varies, and we go
Yep.
through that cycle.
Yep.
I've often sold for various sellers throughout the years 3 or 4 times because kids have left home,
Yep.
or now they just want to lock up and go, or an elderly parent's moved in with them, they now need dual living. So it can affect the sort of home you want to purchase and where do you want to buy as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
What's the stages of your life cycle, isn't it?
Yes, very much so,
Yeah.
very much so. So I think that's important, you know, predominantly when you're going between sort of 30 and 40, we have a lot of families who are looking for very good schools because they're back and forth all the time, so that's important. But once kids have left school, you may want a beach lifestyle, you may want to travel more, so you don't necessarily need to be in the hub of the school any
True.
longer.
Especially
So
because a lot of the state schools, it's hard to get into them.
Very
so you have
much
to
so.
live in that catchment.
Oh,
we
yes,
have,
of course.
We have had that where we've had clients particularly buying the area purely to get into the
Yes.
schools. So it's not that there was anything else apart from just wanting to be in the catchment for the
Wow.
school, the local school.
Yeah.
exactly.
So, what are the property options for people to consider at various stages of their life?
Well, it's an interesting question that you ask that, depending on where they're at. So they could be starting out as a first home buyer, maybe something that's a townhouse or an apartment, and then progress to a family home, maybe upsize from there to a more luxurious home. And then we do that scale where they downsize and kids have left home, they don't need 2 living areas or a media room or a big swimming pool. So that will change. We also, ironically, have a lot of buyers who don't have the deposit or they're happy to rent. They're happy to be flexible, especially where we are on the Gold Coast. It's a very transient area. So some people may come for 3-4 years. They only want to rent.
Yeah.
They don't want to be committed, locked into one property. They want to have that flexibility just to move on.
I noticed that when I moved to Australia, actually, I was brought up to, you know, you either go to university or you go and get a job. If you go to university, you're going to probably spend a big portion of your life paying your university fees off. So buying a
Yes.
property would be that much later in life.
Definitely.
For me and my husband, we didn't go that path. We chose the path of getting a job. He did an apprenticeship, and then we bought our first house together when we were like 20. So we've been kind of going up and up and up the ladder, which
Yes.
historically is what you were kind of meant to do.
Yeah.
But if I'd have gone to the university way, I would have had a different path. So I should have been making different choices, or would have been making different
So-
choices, because that.
As a first home buyer, what made you choose the property that you purchased? Was it location? Was it budget?
I think what we were trying to do back then was just get on the market. We probably didn't really think about anything else outside of that. I think our generation now and our children, probably we need to be educating them on that's not necessarily the norm. The norm is whatever suits you and your circumstances. So what I was leading on to say before was when we came to Australia, we couldn't believe how many people rent.
Yes.
And it's very normal. Whereas, like I said, we were, in a path that meant, you had to buy your first house, you had to have money, and that's what you had to do.
Well, in a city like Sydney, it's quite expensive to buy.
Yes.
So, renting's the only option for some people.
Yeah, and so that was from now, I guess, us teaching our children and educating our listeners, if they are in that situation where they're thinking about purchasing their first property, it doesn't have to be when you're 20. It can be when you're 30, and it can be when you're 25. It can be whenever. It's really what suits your circumstances. And I think
due to the property purchase price, it's going to be very unlikely you're going to be able to afford to buy a property at 20 anyway. By the time you've have to come up with your deposits. So unless you've got help from family, which is so much more common these days.
Speaking of help, so something that I come across quite a bit is parents giving their children a lump sum of money to put towards the deposit. But then there's this thing called genuine savings that kind of affects their ability to borrow. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it depends how much they're coming across, but you still, the lenders have different policies. So they still have a requirement that they're going to ensure the borrower can still actually meet the obligations of the loan, which is why they bring in a genuine savings policy. So there's still different criteria you have to meet, even though family give you that money. So you still got to meet those. And it's going to depend on everyone's circumstances, what that is or how much they're getting. So
what's the average time frame for that?
3 months is usually how much, but it like how long, but it depends how much of a deposit they get to what they have to do.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think what I've also found in trying to assist buyers find properties is giving them various options. So obviously with apartments, you'll have a body corporate, which a lot of buyers are scared of or not sure how they work.
And they think it's a waste of money as well.
They do. Some of them do. So it needs to be clearly explained. What are the benefits, the pros, the cons if you are purchasing a property which is within a body corporate, a freestanding home. We've even had instances, and you can see the trends in the US where buyers are purchasing caravans and living on parents' properties as well.
That's really common now.
It's very common, and we're seeing
becoming
it
more.
And also the tiny homes are really trendy now as well, where they get the old caravans and they do them up.
That's it. And it gives you that flexibility. Once again, also the Australian dream to travel around for a year, do the whole of Australia. So I do have families. I've currently got one now who's sold everything. She's packed up her kids, and they're pretty young, sort of 8 and 11. And she said, I've got 1 year to do this with my kids. So if I don't put
I'd
them...
love to have done that.
Yes, and that's their dream. And they've sold their home.
I'd so love to do that. But it would have been frowned upon years ago, but now it's like, well, what we've learned in our time, being around, is that life is really too short.
That's right.
Yes.
So you've got to go out and do what you want to do. Like if I could spend a year with my daughter and go travelling around Australia, that would be awesome.
I'm currently have a client right now. We're doing a refinance, getting some cash out to help them, assist them do that. She's a registered nurse, so she will get contract work all around Australia. So, and she'll be able to support them on what she's doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that's what they want to do. If they've got young kids, they know at the age they are now, it's the time they want to do it.
Yes.
So it's very common at the moment.
Yeah.
Marie, just going back though, we were talking about, you mentioned about the caravan, like I guess the retirees and the elderly, because obviously maybe on the estate planning side, you might see that as a better option, do you think, than, I know previously you might have put a granny flat in your home.
Yes.
The parents might have, they might have 3 kids, but they put their money into one of their child's homes.
That's right.
To put some add-ons so
And
they
that's
can live
really
there.
risky.
But I can assume that would come out with,
It's
some
really
consequences
risky,
there.
that's right. And often people don't think about, especially the parents that are doing that, and putting that money in to their child's home, they don't think about the risk that the child and their current husband or wife or partner may actually separate, and their money is sitting in their property pool. And so that money is really at risk in that circumstance.
So how can they be protected? Let's say they do want to do that. They've got a couple of $100,000. Let's add on the granny flat or build on. What protection do they have?
They can get a loan agreement prepared by a lawyer, so it documents exactly how much money has been put into the property and then what the terms are. So is it a loan, or do they have an interest in the property? The other thing that can happen is the ownership of the property can be changed.
Yes.
So if the property is worth, I don't know, say $800,000 and they're chipping in 20% of the value to build that granny flat,
Take a share
then the
of that.
title can be changed
Okay.
exactly to protect their share.
Yes.
So that's the best course of action, but the loan agreement on the side is also
And it's
of
probably just not
assistance.
partners. I assume it's sibling as well. Not
Siblings
being,
as well.
Is there some sort of
yeah.
protection there from, I guess, for the estate there? Do
Oh,
they
for
have
the
to put
es-
through the will?
For the estate, yeah.
what-
So it would be through
yeah.
the will. So you'd have to
Yeah.
prepare your will and make mention of that
Okay.
loan or gift that has been made to that particular child
Yeah.
and take that into consideration when dividing up the estate. Yes,
Because
there's
I
lots
actually
to think
I
about
have that
there.
quite common that parents are coming in and you do think, and do I
It's
have an
your
obligation to actually
child,
say
yeah.
that, should you go and speak to someone first before you actually put the money into the one child's? Because I can only see that down the track. It's going
What
to
a-
create some friction there.
Yeah, what advice can we give to our listeners about that? I've got a client at the moment who contacted me probably about 3 weeks ago now. She's got a 24-year-old daughter that she bought an apartment in Australia probably about 3 years ago, she said. She's looking at selling it. The daughter's met a boyfriend. She's moved in with the boyfriend. She doesn't want to move into the property that the mom had bought for her with the money that she'd saved to help her daughter out. And now she's considering selling it because the daughter's gone into a relationship with her boyfriend and they're going to live in that house together. So what I'd like to know is if our listeners were in a situation where we are going to provide money to our children, how do we make sure that money is secured for
Yes.
them? If we're going to put it into property, which again is something we've always said, that future pool of money needs to go into property.
Yes.
You don't want to buy
Safer.
a car with it. We want you
No.
to buy a house. 'Cause
Yes.
Yeah.
it's, that's
And I
the
know
thing
we're all
that's-
familiar with the prenup, but I know,
Yes.
Marie, you mentioned something recently. I can hardly say the word cohabitation.
Cohabitation
agreement.
agreement, yes, that's for de
That's something
facto
I've never
couples.
heard of that before.
It's
So
exactly the
that's-
same as a
yeah,
prenup,
but
only
you
it's
don't
for de
think about
factos.
that.
No, you don't
Yeah.
think about that at all.
Yeah.
And that can protect your assets. But in terms of a parent loaning money to buy a property, the best thing for them to do is to buy the property in their name as opposed to their child's name,
So in the
or
parent's
to
name.
set up
Right.
an entity or some kind of a trust structure
Yes.
to purchase that property in, and that will protect their child's potential inheritance down the track.
Does that then have implications for the parent that's put money into another property if that parent wanted to buy something else for themselves? Like, is that going to be an issue for them? Is that something they need to be aware of?
How
If-
so?
That they are potentially putting themselves into financial debt.
Oh, yes.
You know,
But the
by-
property would be in their name. So it would just depend on how much money, I guess, they're putting into that property, whether they're financing the property, if they are, who's going to be paying the mortgage, those types of things. So all of that would need to be considered. So they should really get advice from a financial advisor to make sure it's within their budget. And, if it is a loan or if they're expecting to get some money paid from their child that's living in the property, having a rental agreement in place,
Yes.
something formal to make sure that money comes in.
And this particular client I'm talking about, she's had issues with the tenants. So she's bought this property in good faith for her daughter. Her daughter's never lived in there. She's had
Yeah.
tenants in there. She's been keeping it for her. Now it's become a burden. Obviously, there's going to be a relationship breakdown, all of those things. So us as parents trying to do the right thing doesn't always work out in the way
No.
that you want it to.
That's right.
And that leads me on to saying that there's lots more people now that don't put money into their children's
Yes.
first home. They go, well, you know what? This house that we've bought as a family, we're actually going to let you live in some of the house or part of the house, and
Yes.
we'll make it so that there's separate living. That seems to be becoming more common now.
Yes,
I
I'm finding they're
find.
very popular, the dual living arrangement where everyone's pooling their money together
Yeah.
because that can go further.
Yeah.
You also have assistance because we are working longer hours. You've got grandparents who can help
Yeah, of
with
course.
kids. So that's something that's also changed for us.
Yeah.
Mum and dad are both working now. Grandparents can be there to assist with picking up from school or homework
Yeah.
or whatever the parents may need. So they're
Yeah.
living together jointly to assist.
Yeah, we've got some neighbours actually that live across the way from us, and we're in awe of them because they have this property that they own. Their children live in that property with their children, and they have this enormous caravan that they park outside. There's
Oh.
plenty of room for it. I've actually gone over and had a bit of a nose inside. And I thought, oh yeah, I could see myself doing this. to the shock of everybody else. But you know, that to me makes me think, wow, that's a really good idea, because they're not actually living in the house. The couple go away for long periods of time.
Yes.
They go and visit their other families that live in, you know, interstate. They have like another son and daughter, and they go take the caravan, and then they go and spend some time with those other family members that live around Australia, and then they come back. And they don't spend large amounts of time
That's
at the
it.
house. So
Yes.
you kind of have that very sort of 50-50 kind of, it's great when you're here, but when you're gone, it's great as well, because we get a bit of a break.
Space,
So
yeah.
sounds like a really good scenario to me.
Definitely,
And
definitely.
another trend over the last 5 or so years is developers building satellite cities. So
Yes.
they build, they're a little bit further out from your main infrastructures. However, they build everything within those
Yes.
developments. So you have your shopping centres, you have your schools, you have your playgrounds, but they're just that little bit further out. However, there's not a lot, apart from maybe employment that, you know, one of the couples are having to drive to, they are still, everything else is there.
Yes,
so
very
it's more
popular.
affordable because the land's a bit cheaper out further.
And there's
the
so many
lots are a
people
little bit
working from
smaller.
home as well now, though,
Yes,
so that would
yeah,
suit
so that's
people
why not
working
everyone's
from
having
home.
to travel. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's probably one of the number one questions that I get asked is,
Really?
yes, definitely. What is the internet connection like here? Does it have NBN? Those questions are being asked much more often to me, because a lot more people are working from home, they don't want to commute anymore, or you can get the same job done if you are trying to juggle kids in a certain amount of time, you can still get all your work done. So that question is certainly at the top of the list when someone is looking to purchase a home. So it can affect the sale price. Fortunately, we're actually very lucky in Australia because our connection and services are actually very good. Even though, you know, some buyers will complain about it, if you compare to the rest of the world, it's actually pretty good standards.
I think a lot more people are working from home. You know, commercial property is quite expensive.
Yes.
So if they can't afford to go into that kind of investment, certainly working from home is definitely something that large companies now will endorse,
very
because
much
they,
so.
they,
Still
they,
now. Yeah.
they appreciate, you know, that rather than having you sat in traffic for an hour and a half or 2 hours and late for work, we're going to get more out of you if you work from home.
And it's less space they need in their commercial premises that they're paying rent
Correct.
for.
That's
so,
true.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So looking for a property with an office space is really
Yes.
important
Yeah.
for some people
Yeah.
to
Good
consider.
internet speed.
Yes,
Yeah.
good internet speed.
So I think if we were going to tell our listeners and give them some advice on what we've learned between us four on the different circumstances, so starting from a family, what do we think we could give to them if they're looking for their first property? What should they be looking for if they're a family? Because they're not going to be looking for an apartment or a townhouse necessarily. They're going to be looking for
More space.
More space.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah.
Second living area.
Very
Yeah.
popular, possibly that extra office or study, a bit of
Yeah.
grass outside for the kids to play. You know, that's
Yeah.
quite, or if you had a family pet, so those things are pretty important. And then, of course, location, depending on the stage of life that you're at. So like we said earlier, if you catch the train every day, then maybe you need to be close to that. Or if you're in the city, then, you know, there'll be certain things which will appeal to you then.
Exactly. Being close to school
Yes.
is really
Yeah.
important for
Yeah.
families, I think,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, so
Yes.
certainly when we categorise those potential buyers, the people that are purchasing their first property at whatever stage in life, we've covered families. If we were covering, say, a couple, their requirements are going to be different again. So if we were going to give them some advice, what would that be? The first thing I would say is being near to all of the local shops and things. That
Coffee
surround-
shops,
restaurants,
yes, restaurants,
yes.
definitely.
Yeah. Public
Definitely.
transport, probably.
Work.
They may not have 2 cars, they might only have 1 car, so they'd probably...
Need a parking space,
Yeah, and
And
potentially.
there's a lot of developments close by to all the infrastructures, so it should be quite, you know,
So apartment
quite
living
common to find that,
potentially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with apartment living, then, of course, comes back to the body corporate. They might be wary of that, but
Exactly right.
if we think it's if it suits them and it's a good purchase for them, then body corporate can actually be quite
Yes.
inexpensive, because they haven't got to pay for gardening, and they haven't got time to fix the pool and
Exactly
all of
right.
those things. So you know, you weigh up the costs. I mean, would you know what the average body corporate would be for something
Yes,
like
depending
that?
on, you know, different areas, they can range anywhere from $60 up to $100, depending on if
That's
it's
per week?
that's per week.
Yeah.
That could be an apartment block. If it has a lift, a bit more expensive because there's maintenance,
Yeah.
things to maintain there. If it doesn't have a swimming pool, it could come right down to $30 a week.
Nicole, what's included in a Body Corp fee?
Yeah, I was just going to
Look,
ask that.
generally,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like you said, it's the maintenance of the common areas, so the gardens, if there's security gates,
Yeah.
things like that,
Tennis
security
pools or tennis
cameras,
courts,
that's a
or
swimming
depends
pool.
what sort of facilities that within the
Yes,
complex itself.
and that'll
Right.
push your price
Yeah.
up if there are apartment blocks which have lifts and things like that. So that is generally what is covered. Insurance as well. So it really just depends your appetite for that. Some purchasers love that way of living, but it's really just giving the options to buyers as to if you had a standalone home, it may cost you X, you know, per week, but have you taken into account the maintenance of the property, which maybe you haven't, because you still possibly, if you're not doing your own gardens, you may need to get someone in.
Yeah, of course.
Are you doing your own swimming pool? Things like that still
Yeah.
needs to be maintained to keep the level up of the property.
It's an actual conversation because we always talk when we do a borrowing capacity is, firstly, it's not what the bank will give you, it's what you can afford. So that this is where the payments are. But if they're looking at units or townhouses, we say, but remember there's body corporate.
Yes.
So just be careful that, you know, these are your loan repayments, but this is a fixed cost every week as well.
On
So it's
top.
not, like you say, your loan, like your lawns on a house, you might let it go a week or two and then do it again after,
Yes.
whereas that is a fixed cost every week. So we
Yeah.
really make sure we have that conversation to ensure
Yeah.
it's good. You
Yeah.
actually build that into your budget when you're doing your loan
But
as well.
then going back to what we were talking about before with the trends and how they're changing, those people who are living much busier lives, which is us, the ones that are coming into this now, and again, their lives are probably going to be even busier than ours, they're probably going to want to look at places like that. And those costs might actually be costs that they're happy to incur.
Yes.
Because I know that I'd pay $60 a week for someone to fix our gardens and do our pool and everything. Like, that would
Yeah.
be amazing. So, yeah, it's just how times have changed, I
Yeah.
guess. We're kind of no longer, we want to do all these things by ourselves because we just don't have the time.
Yes, absolutely.
That's very true.
We
Very
just
true.
don't have the time. And then you've got the other scenario of a single person. And a single person might be looking at an apartment. They might want to get on the
Security.
property
Yes.
ladder, but they just want to buy maybe a one-bedroom place. If someone is in that situation, think about maybe in the next couple of years, realistically, are you going to partner up with somebody else? Do you want that extra room? Is it better to buy a two-bedroom apartment instead of a one-bedroom
Yeah,
apartment?
it might
Because
last you a bit longer.
Yes.
Yeah, you might need that extra space if someone else was to move in with you, and you might want workspace. You might want to get away from that other person at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And Nicole, should people think about on selling down the track? So when they're purchasing a property, should they be thinking about just that, or should they be thinking about down the track, I might want to sell, and is this place in a good location, etc.?
Definitely. I think what we have found the trends is most Australian families are keeping their homes sort of 5 to 7 years. So that's very
Right.
important. We're finding they are either moving because they have to go interstate, or their position has changed, or kids have left home, or they need a bigger home. So we certainly go through that because we know you're not going to be in this home forever. So it is very important where you have purchased, have you done any improvements, or have you bought a great shell, it's got good bones, but we need to upgrade the kitchens, possibly the bathrooms, which, you know, we go through with a lot of clients, which is very important. Or if you put too much of your own personal stamp on the property, can we resell that? You know, some trends with blue baths or black and white checkered tiles, it just depends. Is it going to be saleable in 5-7 years' time?
And then going to the retirees, you know, those people that are downsizing.
Yes.
What advice can we give to them? Like if you're in that situation where we're looking for something that's smaller, we've got to get rid of all the stuff that we've just had in our house for the last 25 years. So when we talk about our grandparents and they suddenly want to
Yes.
downsize.
Yeah, well,
What are the
accessibility, I
options?
think, is a really important thing to consider. Stairs,
Yes.
but, you know, at some point you're not going to be wanting to walk up lots of stairs. It might be a bit difficult with mobility down the track, with less maintenance and cleaning. I'm sure you won't want to do that when you're downsizing and you're a bit older. So I think those things are important.
Retirement villages also once again becoming popular, not just
Yeah.
about living on your own anymore. You may need company.
Yes.
So there is a huge market for that, where older people are moving into even an over 50s development that's got all the facilities you may need, but
Yeah.
you do have friends around you to support you as you are getting older, which is, you know,
Yeah,
very
it's
important.
great. And they also put on lots of activities as well,
Yes.
which is really cool. So
Yeah.
keeps them busy and
Yeah.
Something
happy.
to consider.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know, not having to invest money into your children, but actually having money to be able to buy somewhere like that.
Yeah, on your own.
And still feel like you're going to be able to live a life. I think culture has probably said that, oh, mum's going to get old, she's leaving us some money. But then that mom hasn't thought about their lifestyle for the next
Correct.
however many years, because
Yes.
you know, they could live for another 20 odd years, and yet they're still living in this house that's their children's inheritance. I think that culture is slightly changing.
Yes.
Yeah,
And people
definitely.
are thinking about themselves more, and I think that's normal. You know, we go to work and we earn this money, and at the end of it, we want a good lifestyle until, you know, we leave the place.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But partying when you're 50 plus, I think that's a
That's what we'll be doing, I think.
that's right. Yeah, living on golf courses and all of
Yes,
that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess what we want our listeners to take from today's showcase really is the fact that, you know, don't think about what's going on in your life right now,
Yeah.
as opposed to thinking about the 10-year goal.
Yes.
It's a bit more lifestyle driven now, I think,
It
rather
is
than
very
actually
much so.
just having that dream
Definitely.
of owning your own home and having to have that inheritance at the end of the day. So,
And
what's
life can
best for
change
your-
so
yeah,
quickly as
exactly.
well. So, enjoy your life and don't just put all your eggs in one basket, I think.
As always, thank you for listening to the Lip Talk Girls. We hope we brought you some pills of wisdom. Please follow us on our social media pages. And if you have any requests, please DM us on Insta or Facebook. Watch us on Spotify, YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Woo!